There you go. All right, guys, you take it away without further ado.
All right, thank you very much. And it is a pleasure to be here. Douglas V. Gibbs, Mr. Constitution, my wife, Virginia. Doing the Miss America wave?
If you want to call it that. Okay.
I like. I didn't compliment you. You know, I like that top. You wore it to breakfast this morning too. We every Friday morning there's a local veteran breakfast. A bunch of veterans get together and enjoy that opportunity to spend time with friends. To what we got, two Army guys, an Air Force guy. Used to have two Air Force guys, and one of them just passed away. We had another gentleman that joined us this morning, but he's just visiting. I'm Navy. We're still waiting for our Marine, our Coastie, and our Guardian, right?
Slowly.
To round it all out. All right, so let me adjust that just a little bit. Glad to be here. So I titled today's program Extremes.
Okay.
And we were just talking about this the other day. It's kind of what gave me the idea. Was it last night or the day before?
I do.
Well, you know, as a Christian, and you know, the Bible teaches moderation. Obviously, there are times to be extreme on something, times not to be. There are times to be binary thinking and not binary thinking, and you know, it's up to us to kind of discern, you know, and understand what the season is, and so on and so forth. Context is important, all of that, and so that's and what got me started on this actually was there was there's a listener who's kind of a regular listener and used to take my Constitution class long ago, um, who lives out in Kentucky, and she asked me, and she was concerned about Thomas Massey, Rand Paul, the clash that was going on. And she was kind of, you know, her concern was, well, you know, they're libertarian. And now understand, I'm fine with libertarianism, I guess we could say. I have a certain libertarian streak myself on certain issues and not so much on other issues. So I don't know. And so she was asking, you know, what was my thoughts, you know, and all that. And I had to really think about it because, you know, I'm a firm believer that we should not play the purity game, but at the same time, you don't want the opposition crawling around in your camp, messing things up. So you got to find the right
balance.
Yeah, balance is a good word. Thank you.
Or happy medium, as you want to call it.
Happy medium. Yeah. Well, and that's what the Constitution was all about. The Constitution wasn't about it was about avoiding extremes. It was about a proper distribution of power so that there would not be extremes. You did not want the extreme of tyranny, an extreme of a oligarchy or a tyranny or you know too much power in one place. You know, be it federal government, be it the states, be it president, legislature, judges, and on the same token, you didn't want the extreme of democracy where the people made all the choices because you put all the power in the hands of the people, they mess it up too. Democracy has proven historically to be a failure. So, and so it was all about kind of avoiding those extremes. And in Federalist 10, James Madison discussed that there are going to be factions. There are factions of groups of ideas, of ideologies, whatever you want to call it, and they're going to battle. And you want to make sure that the extremes don't control things. So how do you make sure the extreme doesn't control things? You make the things that oppose it have just as much of a voice so that they kind of balance each other out, right? So the extreme that they were trying to avoid was democracy. You want democracy in the sense that you want people to have a voice. You don't want democracy because they have too much of a voice. They go chasing after, tyranny, or the tyranny fools them, or whatever. Whenever you have a pure democracy where everything is based on the people's vote, um, and Donald Ray Link says, I'm thinking lately that the libertarian label is a cover for something else that's very nefarious. Perhaps. And I'm going to get into the libertarian thing in a minute. But when it comes to, democracy, a little bit of democracy is good, but you don't want too much. It's the reason why when the founding fathers created this country, the only federal position that was purely democratically voted in was the House of Representatives. So an element of democracy needed to be present, but it is not a pure democracy. That's what part of what makes us a republic. A lot of people think what makes us a republic is the representative part. No, I mean that's a part of it, yes, but it goes deeper than that. A large part of what makes us a republic is the fact that it's not a pure democracy. It's not a pure aristocracy. It's not a pure anything. It's kind of a mixture of a bunch of different things, and there's a whole bunch of checks and balances that are in place to avoid the extremes. And so the electoral college, and understand the electoral college doesn't even operate the way it was supposed to originally. Originally the people's vote didn't matter when it came to electors, in the sense of the way we do it today, where the winner electorally with a popular vote in a state is where all the electors go. That's not the way it used to be. Every district voted for their elector, and then that elector voted for president for that group of people, that district. And a state may have electors going in 3 or 4 different directions depending on candidates and how they voted. Each elector went where it went, and then all of the electors weren't voted in by the people. 2 of them typically. I mean, some of the states deviated, but this is the way they typically did it. It was up to state legislatures to choose exactly. And then 2 of those electors would be appointed and vote based on what the state house or state assembly, or whatever you can call it, and the state senate wanted. So it was kind of a mixture. And this was designed to avoid the entrapment of democracy, the excesses of democracy. The U.S. Senate, originally, before the 17th Amendment, the 2 senators were appointed by each state legislative house. And the reason behind this was so that the states could have some oversight, a voice in the legislature. Let the people have their voice in the House, let the states have their voice in the Senate, and those senators would be people who the state legislatures trusted, that would vote in a manner that's best for the state's interests, rather than an ideology or the hot-headedness of a populace, or what's right, the fickleness of the populace, I think is one of the words that they used, and also because the way everything was designed, the state Senate and the U.S. Senate would be largely the rural voice, and the democratically elected state house and House of Representatives, United States House of Representatives, would be more of a city voice, because population would rule when with the democratic vote. And so what it did is it allowed the cities to have their voice, and allowed the rural areas, which was a minority, a lower number of people, to have their voice in the Senate. And this way, neither one of them controlled the other or controlled everything. And the agrarian areas were nervous about democracy because, as I like to say, if you have pure democracy, and basically means the cities control everything because they have the bigger populations, then what winds up happening is you wind up with the city representatives of cities dictating to farmers how to farm. Well, that makes no sense. And you have other problems as well, that because the city-minded folks typically, and I'm not saying this is true with everyone that lives in a city, but generally they're more dependent on government and more dependent on outside sources than are the rural areas. You in the rural areas, you can grow your own food. If you really want to, you can make your own clothes. You can, get your own water out of a well, whatever. When you're in a city, you depend on those city services, on the grocery store, whatever. You're more dependent on things. And so your way of voting is to keep that dependency in place, to keep those, whatever the benefits are, programs or whatever they are, flowing. In the country, it's when you're in a rural area, it's more of a, leave me alone, government, mind your own business. If I really need you, I'll let you know. And founders understood this. They were trying to avoid the extreme of one or the other.
They wanted to find a balance.
Right. So now when you get into politics, and you have the Democrats, and the Democrats of yesterday were the same as Democrats of today. They've just given in more to the collectivistic edge of it. They're also allowing more of where they stand on collectivism to be exposed. You can go all the way back to the 30s, 30s, 40s, and they were still basically commie lights. It's just they hit it well, and they knew to only inject a little bit at a time so that the boiling frog wouldn't notice the increase of the heat, right? The Democratic Party, when it first started under Andrew Jackson, the reason why it took on the name Democratic Party is because it was more about going towards democracy, which is also a danger. Democracy, under Andrew Jackson, developed into what eventually became both parties pushing a stronger centralized system, and trying to use the vote to get it. The radical Republicans would, when the Republican Party first became a party, while on some levels there was a good thing about it, and anti-slavery, whatever, but the Republican Party, when it first became a party, it was a big government party. Radical Republicans in Lincoln, they were all about, increasing the size of federal control. And the Democrats at that time were more about states' rights. Of course, they also wanted to push for democracy. So you had two bad ideas competing against each other. It wasn't really until the turn of the century, after 1900, that you start to see what we see today as a conservative way of looking at things begin to develop. And then before, the Jeffersonian ideas were closer to what today we consider conservatism, originalism, whatever you want to call it. The 1800s, we really shifted from being this republic to a national government pushing for democracy. And then we get into the 20th century, and the 17th Amendment, the 16th Amendment, Federal Reserve, solidified that central control a little bit more. Democracy was pushed even harder. And now here we are in the 21st century, and now we're battling all the repercussions of all of that idiocy that has happened over the last 250 years of moving us towards something that's a bigger control government and all that. Now, the reason why I bring up libertarianism, and libertarians don't get mad at me, because I want you to understand, once again, I'm about balance. And so this message I got by email from this woman in Kentucky, who's, once again, longtime listener, reader, follower, used to be in one of my Constitution classes. And she had questions about libertarian principles and how they differ from traditional conservatism, originalism. And I told her that this really deserves careful consideration. We have to really look into it, because we live in kind of a binary world. And when I say binary world, in other words, the extremes, getting back to extremes, it's either this or it's that. It's either far this or far that, and any degrees in between is not really considered. And so you've got the extremes of collectivism and the extremes of libertarianism. And once again, I'm not necessarily saying that libertarianism generally is a bad thing or a good thing or whatnot. I'm not, and so please don't misunderstand me. But as I looked into this, I got into, and the reason why this question even came up was because of Thomas Massie and Rand Paul. And I've always liked Massie and Paul. But on the same token, on certain issues, they've gone to such an extreme. They can't see, the moderate angle on it, or they can't discern some of the ways you need to look at it. So, And as a Christian and a constitutionalist, understand that my first thoughts are typically going to align with my faith and the U.S. Constitution. And I also, when it comes to my faith, I recognize, and I don't remember where it is in Jeremiah, but in Jeremiah, the book of Jeremiah in the Old Testament, the Lord reminds us that the heart is wicked. And so what it's saying is that your feelings, your emotions will steer you in the wrong direction. Now, this is not to say that you ignore your heart, but this is also to say you don't follow only your heart. And what do you hear among, the media and Hollywood and all of that stuff today? Oh, follow your heart, right? How do you feel about that? We hear that all the time, right? And the Democratic Party's become all about how do you feel? And it's funny because I remember, sports, and the sportscasters used to ask about, certain plays, certain things that happen. Now the first questions are, how do you feel about what happened? And so it's like it's become this, we lead with the heart kind of thing in our society. And once again, don't get me wrong, you have to take what your heart says in consideration, but on its own, it's going to lead you in the wrong direction. That's just the reality of it. That's human nature. And the founding fathers understood human nature. And so our system is based on going beyond just your heart. And our faith is beyond just what your heart says. We need to rely on not only our feelings and emotions, they'll lead us astray. We also have to reason, use logic, be pragmatic, morality, our ability to analyze, maybe deeper than what's on the surface, see the full context, so on and so forth. Scripture also reminds us to avoid extremes, which is what I'm talking about earlier. Often it's moderation. And it's like sometimes a sin isn't a sin because of what you do. It's if it goes extreme. It's not a sin to eat, but it is to be gluttonous, extreme. It's not a sin to have a little wine, but it is if you go to the extreme and you're drinking to get intoxicated, for whatever reason. So, and when I look at the issues, I try not to get into the trap of binary thinking. I try not to get into the trap of extremes. I always consider that there may be degrees of variance in between. Don't get me wrong. Sometimes there is an extreme. Sometimes something is extremely right and extremely wrong. Sometimes those extremes do exist. But in most cases, especially when it comes to politics, and it also reminds me, and you've been hearing me say this our whole marriage. There's always three sides to every story: what he said, what she said, and what really happened. And we have to take all of that into consideration. And I think, and I'm going to ask you this because you kind of have a psychology background here. I think people get lazy. It takes too much work to look deeply into something. It's easier to be told something or to just assume something or based on what you see without looking deeper. Am I?
The thing is, though, Doug, if you have to analyze whatever it is that you're looking at, you have to take it apart. And for a person to sit down or think about it and take it apart, it's going to take time. Are you willing to put in the time to take things apart and look at things differently and do things the right way? Then in that process, what you used to do and your attitude would have to change. You would have to be willing to change to it is what you want to get across to someone. And are you willing to take the time and lose some friendships over that? So it's easier to say, we'll just do that. Okay, we'll just go for it.
Yeah.
Not realizing the implication at the other side, at the other end.
And sometimes we're trained to think a certain way, and we don't want to think a little deeper. I mean, the education system's really good at that.
Are we trained, or we just allow it and accept it for what it is?
Well, because even though what we've been told, we do have the ability, the free will to say yes, no, or in between, right?
That's true. So where do you draw the line and say, hey, you got to think for yourself?
Right.
There you go.
Well, and this is not this is not to say that you don't take into consideration what other people have to say, other input, but in the end, the decision's your own, for
Right.
sure. We had this discussion, I don't know, a month or so ago, or maybe a little bit longer, on this program where, I was, and you and I didn't disagree, but you kind of, your woman and your psychology kind of clung more to the emotions, but I was basically saying on the program, in the end, everybody has the ability to say yes or no.
Right.
Yes, there are circumstances, and I get all that, and I'm not going to get into that discussion.
No, wait a second.
But
there's always circumstances, no matter
oh,
what
absolutely.
you do. Whether you buy something at the store, something small or big.
But in the end, we have our own decision.
But sometimes it's hard for someone to deviate.
Didn't I just say I didn't want to get into this?
But it's kind of hard, Doug, to get something and
but see that
and take it apart.
But that's the maternal instinct.
Well,
You're maternal.
I'm
You're
woman,
right.
Okay.
And
I'm glad. But the thing is also, I also could take things apart and take the time to do so. But the question is, do I want to take the time? Do I want to lose?
Most people don't.
Some friendships over that, because your thinking might be a little bit different. People will look at you differently because now your way of thinking is different. If you're going to take the time to pull things apart and get a different perspective on things, and people think it's too much work, I don't want to do it. If I do this, people are going to look at me differently. Am I willing to risk the friendship or whatever else I'm doing for that? Is it really worth it, the change and taking things apart?
Well, that goes back to what I was talking about, because you're getting back into the heart and Jeremiah,
Right.
And all of that needs to be taken into consideration.
Right.
But it's not to dominate the decision.
Correct.
You have to go beyond that. You have to just, discern and
Right.
consider, look at the content.
Right.
But for most people, they don't.
No, it's too. Is
it because that's the way we are naturally as human beings, or is it a cultural thing, or maybe a little bit of both? What do you think?
It's a little bit of everything.
Oh.
You're growing up, your environment, your ecosystem,
Feminization of men,
who you associate with, the friends that you have, because you're not going to have the same friends you have at church if you're going to have when you're going out with other friends on a Friday night
Right.
or Saturday night. So you have to consider all that.
Oh, Warhamster, I am going to critique libertarians. Don't worry, we're going to get there. Warhamster is in the chat room. Oh, look, won't critique. Oh, yes, I am. But the thing is, I'm setting this up because I want to make sure everybody understands. Once again,
that we all have our minds and we think things differently.
There is that, but as an originalist, and my mindset has always been that we can't think binary. This person good, that person bad, that good, that bad. No. There's more to it than that. It's always deeper. It's like, so let's get back to libertarianism, because we were kind of going off the path here.
By libertarian? Exactly.
So, well, that's what I'm going to explain. And so, Warhamster, keep your pants on, unless he's already sitting in his pajamas. I could have said something else.
I don't know what you were going to
say. Anyway, but once again, when I think about this stuff, get back to the point here, is I always consider that there may be degrees of variance in between.
There always is.
Yeah, this is not to say that there should not be absolutes regarding everything. Once again, sometimes there are absolutes.
Yes, depends on what it is.
Yeah, and I don't want to start throwing out examples. I'm sure all of you have ideas of certain things that are an absolute, but there are times to recognize absolutes.
And sometimes we don't recognize that.
Well, I get that, but hang on. Okay. I don't want this to get into a psychological and philosophical discussion, because I've got a certain place I want to go here. So let's not deviate too far here. There are times to recognize absolutes. And there are times to recognize that the answer may reside in something many of us might call the gray area. Okay. Now, I wrote an article about this, about the libertarianism and all that, and Warhamster, without naming you, I mention you in the article. I write, I have a friend of mine who tells me all the time that he is a small L libertarian. And so for the readers, for the listeners, his point is that, in this case, it's Warhamster. I'm letting it out there. That's what I'm talking about. His point is that he adheres to much of the libertarian philosophy, or perhaps some of them. but he's not necessarily in line with the big L libertarian position, which would fit the political party's platform. So we have to recognize, first of all, that there is a crucial distinction here. There is definitely a need to distinguish between libertarianism as a political philosophy and the Libertarian Party as a political organization. Many Americans embrace libertarian principles without formally joining the party. Many of us have some libertarian principles we might believe in. Many, some, a few, none. Everybody's going to be different. So when I say, first of all, when we get into libertarian, I want people to understand that I'm not trying to paint a particular picture. I'm just recognizing. I mean, I align with many libertarian principles on some issues, and when I get around libertarians, I start talking Constitution. More often than not, they're jazzed about what I have to say. But to be honest, as I've watched politics, not all libertarian things are necessarily in something I favor. Philosophical libertarianism, though, has definitely gained significant influence in recent decades. Libertarianism fundamentally emphasizes individual liberty, limited government intervention in both personal and economic matters. That's good. And at its core is this non-aggression principle, which holds that initiating force against others is inherently illegitimate. Now, this principle shapes libertarian views on pretty much everything from taxation to foreign policy.
I'm not understanding.
All right, so
Okay.
you're not understanding? In what way you're not understanding?
The definition of what it actually means.
Well, libertarianism,
libertarianism
libertarianism tends to be a. Remember I was talking about earlier with the agrarian society, leave me alone, government, none of your business, just let me do my thing. It's my decision. That's like almost pure libertarianism. And the non-aggression part is kind of a, I hate to say it this way, because it's really a libtard way of saying it, but make love not war kind of thing. I would rather debate it and philosophize and let's come to an agreement through diplomacy or working together rather than there be any collision of ideas or conflict. And that is not to say that libertarians don't recognize that sometimes conflict's going to happen, but they tend to try to avoid it if they can.
Oh,
okay.
Okay.
If you want 10 definitions of libertarianism, ask 5 libertarians. Yeah, it's just like the old joke about, what do you get when you have a room with 10 rabbis, 20 different opinions. So yeah, I totally get it. But get back to the point here, because I don't want to get too far off my point. Libertarianism and the Libertarian Party don't always necessarily mesh. The party has gone kind of extreme and off of some wrong roads on a few things, just like the Constitution Party. You think, Constitution Party, it's all about the Constitution.
Right.
But the original intent of the Constitution, more often than not, is not where the Constitution Party is.
Oh.
And the Constitution Party tends to chase ideas that I'm like, I don't think so. So just because it has the word Constitution in it or Libertarian in it as a party doesn't necessarily mean it philosophically adheres to those principles.
Okay.
So when someone says libertarian, it's like saying federalist.
Okay.
You've heard me say this. Federalist is someone who believes in the principles of the Constitution. But a federalist in the sense of the Federalist Party, the Hamiltonian Party, was more of a nationalist. So when someone says, well, they were a federalist, which do you mean? Because it's the same word, but it's being used in 2 different ways. And libertarian's kind of the same way between the party and the philosophy. And so there's a lot of people who consider themselves libertarian or mostly libertarian in their philosophy, but they don't necessarily adhere to the party.
Okay.
Okay, does that make sense?
Yes.
All right, so now, Libertarian Party.
Okay.
So libertarian ideas, philosophy has been around since forever. I mean, like I said, those early agrarian-minded early Americans, for the most part, they would be what we would consider today very libertarian.
Okay. All right.
Leave me alone. None of your business. Let me do my thing. It's my decision.
That's a good thing, right?
Government shouldn't be in my face, and don't try to. And I don't believe in a standing army. I don't want any conflict. Don't stick your nose in what I do. Right? That's a very libertarian way of looking at things.
Well, it sounds
generally
good to a point.
Well, yes, but and I'm going to get into the different nuances.
I was going to say.
So the party, though, really didn't appear in its current form until 1971.
Oh, just recently then.
And it attempts to translate libertarian philosophical principles into specific policy positions. Now, that said, there are many politicians who are, for the most part, libertarian or incorporate libertarian ideas into what they do, like Rand Paul and Thomas Massey, but they operate in the Republican Party rather than as a third-party candidate. And there's a number of reasons for that. They may have more in common with the Republican Party and the Libertarian Party on certain things. They may, but also it's understood that, and this is a reality, and I'm not going to get into a debate over love or hate for the two-party system. But the fact is, there are two major parties. And if you're not a member of one of those two parties, you're probably not going to be able to win a major election. Maybe some local election, but something major. It's just because the money and there's a lot of stuff that goes into that. And I don't want to derail myself into getting into that discussion. But
makes sense.
And the unfortunate thing is, especially if you can't stand the two-party system, is we naturally kind of do that. If you were to get rid of the parties right now, then an issue came up. There's going to be those that are for it, against it. They're going to organize because birds of a feather flock together. They're going to pick a leader.
Yeah.
Boom, you have your party, right? In Austria, I think it's Austria, they got like 15 different political parties, but they coalesce into two basic coalitions.
Oh my goodness.
It's still,
it's
a two-party system without having two parties.
Got it. Okay.
See what I'm saying? Because there tends to be this less government, big government idea. Now, sometimes what will happen, and this is what was happening with the Republican Democratic Party, once again, without getting too deep into the weeds, is the Republican Party and the Democratic Party, when it came to the machine, the Leviathan, it was a uniparty. Okay. And in many ways, it still is. They feed from the same trough. Okay. And then on the surface, they are opponents, but in reality, they both want big government. President Trump's MAGA movement has kind of reshaped the Republican Party. There's still a national kind of power, kind of little bit there, but not like it used to be. The establishment is being dismantled. And when I say establishment, I'm talking, those Republicans that are basically, collectivist light. Wow. And the Democrats are kind of collectivist heavy. But anyway, so to get back to the libertarianism, Rand Paul, Thomas Massey, operating in the Republican Party, because they probably wouldn't have been able to become a representative or a senator. Thomas Massey's representative, Rand Paul, a senator, if they were members of the Libertarian Party. Maybe, but probably not. So they chose the vehicle, the vessel, the Republican Party, that would probably best get them there. Okay. But they have libertarian kind of leanings, and libertarians, traditional conservatives, constitutionalists, establishment Republicans, they're all in the same party, and they share common ground on some things, but not necessarily everything. So there is going to be that mishmash, push, shove, whatever. And now, traditional conservatives, I'm not talking about the established, traditional conservatives, constitutionalists like myself, libertarians, all share the common ground for their desire for limited government and constitutional restraints on federal power. That's not a discussion that we can say is okay. They totally, typically, maybe how much of that limitation may be slightly different, variations, context, but for the most part, they agree on that. And libertarians and constitutionalists, traditional conservatives generally support free market ideas, property rights, individual responsibility, taking responsibility for your actions, so on and so forth. Being a responsible citizen.
That sounds good.
All of that. Okay. Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Now there may be some differences. For example, foreign policy, and this is where Massey and Trump kind of butted heads. Okay.
Okay.
Libertarians typically advocate non-interventionalism based on the non-aggression principle.
Meaning?
They basically would oppose a military engagement unless directly defending against aggression. In other words, your military should not be used unless you are directly attacked.
Okay.
Direct confrontation.
Okay, well,
In other words, you don't shoot till they shoot at you first kind of attitude, okay?
Well,
To help. Go ahead.
Well, I guess that would make sense too.
Well, it does.
Right? I mean, I'm not going to go around shooting people for the heck of it.
Well,
I mean,
but see now, but you're doing what they do in politics now. You're going binary. Oh, well, if it isn't this, it must be that. If it's not waiting, then you want to go shoot everybody first, and that's not what I'm saying.
Well,
that is the right way to do. But that's the way politics has been framing it. This is why I was bringing up the binary thing earlier. One of my frustrations is if it isn't this, it must be that. Okay. So if you're not willing to only get involved militarily, unless you're attacked, then you must want to just attack all the time. There are variances in between.
That's like having a bully picking on you.
Well, and understand that traditional conservatives tend to recognize the necessity for a strategic international engagement, occasional military action to address genuine threats, and then your establishment Republicans tend to be, shoot first, ask questions later, and besides, it's going to make us lots of money if we go to war. So, there's and I'm kind of somewhere between the libertarian and the traditional conservative, where I recognize that it's dangerous to get involved in foreign entanglements. And I don't believe that we should be using our military around the world.
I do agree on that.
Unless whatever's going on is either directly influencing our interests or has something to do with a treaty that we've made. In other words, we have an ally who's been attacked or something like that.
If it's not our fight, why are we?
Well, exactly. For the most part, right. I agree with that.
Then why are sticking our nose in something that does not?
But then the question comes up: is it our fight? And that's where sometimes the discussions get a little sticky.
Well, my thing is, why am I going to fight another country if they have nothing to me? Oh,
right.
What's the purpose me for wanting to attack them first, or vice versa?
Well, now you get into the heart of the Massey-Trump disagreement.
You know what I'm saying? What do I get out of it?
All right, so hang on.
Okay.
So now you get into the heart of the Massey-Trump disagreement.
Okay.
Massey's like, you have no business doing what you did to Iran. Trump's like, hey, if they get a nuclear weapon, we have problems. And so, hang on.
Yes.
Let me finish. Let me finish.
Okay.
Well, it wasn't an if. They were
You just said if.
Yeah, well, but the way you said if was, it might not happen. No, it was definitely going to happen.
Okay.
If they got it, we got a problem. So, and it's going to happen. So you make it an if by stopping it.
So,
and once again, I don't want to get, I don't want to chase rabbit trails. So I want to be very careful here. I want to kind of stay on track. So I appreciate the questions, but I don't want to spend the whole show trying to explain other things when I have a general kind of topic. And I love you, honey, but so it's not. And so my language, when I said if, it wasn't if, but they probably won't. It was if they got it, and it looked like to Trump it was inevitable. They were already taking actions towards that.
That makes sense.
And he believed they had missiles that could travel farther than everybody was saying, and they proved it when they hit Diego Garcia.
Right. Okay.
So, see what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And so, but that if to one person may not be the same if. It may have been the way you were using it.
Yes.
Well, if, they probably won't.
Right.
See what I'm saying? Or we got to wait until we're positive. Well, if you wait till you're positive and they shove a missile up your rear end, it's too late.
No, I completely understand what you're saying, and I understand the argument between these two people.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact is, you have to make a decision based on what you think is going to happen in the future.
Well, and that's what the president did, and Massey's saying, no, you're going around starting wars, another forever war, and I don't believe it to be. I'm more in line with Trump on this. I do believe that they were inevitably would have had a nuclear weapon, and the thing is, they're going to still keep trying, even if you stop them now. In the next 5 years, 10 years, whatever.
That's their mentality, though.
Yeah, but because also, and I don't know if Trump fully understands this.
Oh.
But when it comes to understanding Islam, especially Shiite Islamism, and and everybody's like, well, they're not agreeing to anything. They're being completely, yeah, of course they are, because they believe Allah is on their side. So first of all, Islam operates based on if they believe it is the will of Allah.
Yes.
So as long as they think it's the will of Allah to do something, they will keep pushing.
Yes.
And then when they believe it's no longer Allah's will, it doesn't mean stop. It means delay.
Delay, yeah.
Regroup, and then we'll just do it later.
Right.
And so we have to understand that, first of all, about Islam in general. Yeah. When it comes to Shiites, they believe in the 12th Imam. And what this is this idea that in the future, there can be a grand worldwide caliphate, worldwide Islamic state.
Oh, wow.
And it will be led by a 12th Imam that will rise from the grave once the world is in so much chaos that he's needed. Oh, and so they have what's called an apocalyptic vision.
Wow. Okay.
Of the future for their whatever the grand caliphate. And so nuclear. So they're not so. And then this is why it's kind of sticky, because see, with the Soviet Union, we had this term, mutual assured destruction. So so we could build up lots of nuclear weapons. They could build up lots of nuclear weapons, but we knew there would never be a nuclear war because neither one of us wanted to be totally destroyed.
Which makes sense to me.
And so that made sense.
Yes.
China kind of the same way.
Okay.
But Iran doesn't operate with that mindset. Or the Shiites, should I say.
Okay.
The Iranian people is not, I'm talking about the Iranian leadership, not the Iranian people.
Right.
The Persian people.
Right.
So the leadership has this mindset, this Shiite mindset, that be destroyed, mass chaos, whatever, cities burning, that's good because the 12th Imam will rise. And then if you read the Hadiths, which is a lot of what the Shiites also rely on, and certain verses of the Quran, but a lot of it is from the Hadiths, is that then what they believe is that when this great chaos happens, and the world is in complete chaos and it's on fire, that the 12th Imam will rise, and that even the rocks will shout who the infidels are for the Muslims to kill them, who the Christians and the Jews are to kill them. Even the rocks will shout, there is one, kill it. Wow. And then they also, in this teaching, is they believe that Jesus Christ will have a second coming, but as a prophet for Islam, and he will also point out the Christians and the Jews so they can be killed. This is what they believe. So how can you trust someone to even get close to having a nuclear weapon if chaos is their goal? And they don't care if they start firing and get fired upon, because they believe that's what's necessary to bring about ultimately the 12th Imam and the Great Caliphate. So this is the reason why I'm in line with Trump's decision.
Okay,
this is not something where you can wait until they hit you.
No, that makes sense. I understand what you're saying, and it makes sense because their frame of thinking is way out there.
Sure it is.
And is nowhere near what we would consider normal thinking.
Right.
It's actually, I don't know what kind of the word that I want to use is devilish, I guess. Warped thinking,
Well, and there's a lot of things we could say about it. And I don't want to get into this being a lesson on Islam, but I did want to give that so that it was understood. Now that said,
well, that makes sense though, because I can see what you're saying, and it makes logic sense because two people are looking at it from a different perspective. You really have to know the people that you are in. I don't know what's the word that I'm looking for. I can't think of it at the moment. So you have to actually see beyond that which President Trump
Well,
has.
well, it gets back
You know what I'm saying?
to greater.
Okay.
It gets back to a greater understanding of the context.
Right. Not only that, but not only that, but you're also looking at the people, their way of thinking and their ideology. What's the other gentleman's name that you're talking about?
Rand Paul and Thomas Massey.
Massey is not looking at that. He's looking at for what it is
Well,
now.
because he has a strict non-aggression
Right.
kind of
He's not
libertarian
looking-
way of
he's
looking
not-
at things. Yeah.
He's not looking beyond the tip of his nose at what these people are actually thinking. And that's a problem though, too,
Well,
because
and
like anything in life, you need to look beyond your tip of your nose to find out what's
but
actually going on.
I get the fears though, because also we live in a world where we've got a political establishment that wants emergencies all the time, wants war all the time because it's good for them. So how do you
Yes.
distinguish between that garbage and when it's necessary?
One thing at a time.
And so this is where I get back into this.
I agree with Trump. Yeah.
Well, this is when I get back into this. We've got to really use our discernment. We've got to look deeper
Yes.
than what's on the surface. We
Right.
can't just,
Can't take it for face value.
you've got to consider everything.
Right.
And the reality is there is an establishment that wants emergency all the time. Because if you have emergencies, well, then you can suspend the Constitution, do whatever you want, whenever you want, because it's an emergency. And if there's war, it's good for, and they have their reasons,
Right.
bankers and, and weapons manufacturers, and the list goes on and on and on and on. So
Yes.
because that reality is there,
Mm-hmm.
when we have a conflict, all of that comes to our mind.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, John, another stupid war, these damn politicians, right?
Right.
But there are times, unfortunately, they are the rare times. Most of the wars are designed and they're there for profit or whatever.
Yeah,
but there
exactly, yeah.
are times when it's necessary, and I believe that in this instance it was, especially with my understanding of Islam. The only reason why I have the understanding of Islam that I do is not only because I've read the Quran, I've read Hadith, I've studied it because religion fascinates me, but also because I've had friends in my past that have been former Muslims who I've had deep conversations about this stuff with. And Waleed Shabat's one of them. You remember Waleed Shabat? I've met him a bunch of times. We got to know each other quite well. I haven't heard from him in a long time though. But or my friend Dean, who's
Right.
originally from Iran,
Yes.
and his response, I asked him not too long ago. I said, so I sat with him. What was it, about 3 weeks ago? And I sat with him and I said, hey, so what do you think about what's going on with Iran? He says, well, Trump's being too careful. Go in and kill them all. He meant the leadership.
The leadership,
This is a guy who's originally from Iran. He said none of them can be trusted. The Iranian leadership, not a single one of them can be trusted. Let the people have their country back. Get Islam out of Iran.
Yeah.
I mean, he's like, kill them all. And this is, like I said, someone who's originally from Iran. So this is, I think, one of those instances where a military operation was necessary. And you got to remember, Trump he didn't like what happened in Iraq.
Right. Yes.
And he went into office with the attitude of, no more new wars, no forever wars. But then suddenly he's faced with this and he's got to make a decision.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
And, and I'm sure it was hard for him to make that decision because you don't want to do something like this. War is never something you want to engage in. And also we have, the ally Israel, who's surrounded by the enemy.
Yeah.
And we want to look out for them. We want to
Right.
protect Israel. And when you've got a country that's just over the way with missiles that can easily reach Tel Aviv, and they're not going to hit Jerusalem because they consider that to be a sacred city from a Muslim point of view. But and after what happened on October 7 and all that jazz, you also want to be ready
Right.
But and then when it came to Iran's ability to send missiles into Europe, once again, they sent one to Diego Garcia. They have the capability, and we don't know how far away they may be from a ballistic intercontinental missile to get to the United States.
True. That's right.
And so, and he's watching all this. He's weighing the options. So I trust President Trump in his decision. There's a little bit of talk about Netanyahu in the chat room. And I agree with you, Sons of Liberty. I think Bibi is the subordinate in the relationship. If you ever watch how Trump handles other leaders, he's the dominant one, man. It's like even the way he shakes hands, he's got his hand up and over. And they're like little, almost like a little woman, he commands the situation. That's the way Trump is. So, and I'm not going to get into a big conversation about Israel, but, and Warhamster and I have talked about Israel before. He says, hey, two things can be true, that, Israel don't agree with a lot of decisions Israel makes, but yet still support Israel. Just because, as a Christian, I support Israel doesn't mean I just disregard, anything that might bother me about them. I mean, in every system is going to have its right, its left, it's up, it's down, it's good, it's bad. I mean, just when Obama was president, we all weren't a bunch of lefties, though. So while sometimes the leadership in Israel may be this, it doesn't necessarily mean that everybody is that. Right. So and once again, and yes, Tina Anand says propagandists think Israel's leading Trump by the nose, and yeah, that's definitely not true. I agree that Trump has got full. He's the one in charge here. Now that said, yeah. Now that said, get back to kind of my discussion, because once again we kind of exited where I was kind of going with it. So when it comes to foreign policy, you've got and understand George Washington says the best way to preserve the peace is to be ready for war. So in other words, peace through strength.
I agree.
And George Washington also wisely cautioned against foreign entanglements, but he also understood that a world with hostile regimes sometimes requires difficult choices.
We just hope we make the right choice.
Right. Now, get back to the libertarian discussion. So on social issues, this is probably where libertarians and conservatives and someone like me probably differs the most, is social issues. My joke has always been that libertarians are conservatives who smoke dope, but because conservatives tend to support laws reflecting traditional moral values. Libertarians generally believe that such matters should be left to the individual conscience rather than government regulation. That explains the libertarian support for drug decriminalization, marriage issues, which are positions that concern many conservatives. And then when it comes to immigration, most libertarians favor more open immigration policies based on free market principles, but they don't necessarily go so far as the left when it comes to open borders. And conservatives tend to be, more border security, controlled immigration. Now, as a constitutional originalist, when it comes to these issues, one of the foundational principles of what I believe is the enumeration doctrine. I believe that the federal government's powers are properly limited to those enumerated in the Constitution, expressly enumerated. The 10th Amendment reserves all other powers to the states or the people. So this framework allows for local solutions to local problems while maintaining national standards for issues truly requiring federal attention. External stuff for the federal government, things that are about the union for the federal government, and then local issues and internal improvements and all that for the states. James Madison explained this in Federalist number 45. So if you want to go check it out, Federalist paper number 45, James Madison wrote that the powers delegated to the federal government are few and defined, while those remaining with the states are numerous and indefinite. And then he goes on to explain that that the ones of the federal government are external and have to do with the welfare of the union, and the ones for the states are more about what's, internal and, internal improvements and so on and so forth. Uh, this constitutional balance doesn't mean that states should become tyrannical, though. Article 4, Section 4 requires them to maintain a Republican form of government, but it does answer the question about issues like abortion, marriage, drug criminalization. So while your libertarians say none of any government's business,
Okay.
and establishment conservatives and maybe some mainstream conservatives say, well, it's okay if federal government gets involved with this because we can't be having such and such happen. When it comes to someone like me, my attitude is, well, it's up to each state. If one state wants to allow abortion, another state outlaws it, then that's the proper constitutional way to handle it. Now, as a Christian and as a pro-life believer, I would hope that all the states would eventually outlaw abortion. But in the end, I don't believe that the federal government, for example, has any business in that. When it comes to marriage, I don't think that government should have any say in marriage at all. The reason why they do is to collect a tax on it. I really think it should be left up to the churches, and the churches should be operating like any business. If a church wants to not perform marriages for same-sex couples, gay, homosexual couples, then let them make that decision. And if they want to, then let them make that decision. And their size of their congregation, how they do, is going to be a direct reflection of that decision.
That makes sense.
Yeah,
I like it. That makes really sound sense. Yeah.
And the drugs the same way. And these issues, like I said, ultimately belong to the states to decide for themselves. None of these issues are any of the federal government's business. The libertarian tendency is to push limited government principles further than constitutional parameters allow for. And that creates tension. For instance, while I might question whether federal regulation of aviation properly falls under the Commerce Clause, my response isn't to eliminate all regulation, but, from my point of view, because I'm trying to also discern and, look at things deeper than what's on the surface, I want to either clarify the constitutional authority or return the power to the states, because aviation is not mentioned in the Constitution as a federal authority. So technically, the FAA is an unconstitutional. Should the federal government regulate aviation? Probably, I think so. Well, then let's pass an amendment. Let's make it official. As long as it's not official, technically those powers belong to the states. That's kind of where I'm at. Is my attitude is, if the federal government should have an authority, let it go through the process, let the states decide whether or not the federal government can have that authority through the ratification process. Now, when it comes to libertarian positions that trouble conservatives, constitutionalists, people like maybe me, maybe people like you, maybe not, I don't know, the borders. Most libertarians don't advocate completely for open borders like the lefties do. But they emphasize property rights, voluntary association, so they support immigration reform. They recognize some border security as legitimate, but they don't necessarily think there should be there should be a wall or any armed, whatever. I believe that, it's necessary and federal government has that authority. Drug policy, libertarian opposition to drug prohibition stems from viewing substance use as a personal choice rather than a matter of criminal prosecution, not from promoting drug use itself, but because I think it can be damaging to the overall culture of society. I do think there needs to be laws for that. I don't think we should be decriminalizing drugs. Now, that said, once again, it's up to each state. And Oregon, they had pretty much decriminalized all drugs, and guess what happened? It was such a disaster. They repealed that law. When it comes to social issues, like, libertarians tend to support same-sex marriage and other social freedoms. Really? Oh, yeah. Oh. Well, because they're at, once again, live and let live. Let the person decide. And getting back to what I'm saying, while Personally, I'm against same-sex marriage.
I agree.
I don't believe government should be sitting there dictating.
I agree on that too.
So that needs to be up to the culture and up to the people. So if you want to marry that dude, and you can find a church willing to do it, or you want to go do a civil union, do it, but understand there's going to be certain consequences, and government should not be
Dictating.
forcing everybody to celebrate it,
I agree
or
on that,
forcing
yeah.
a church to carry out such a procedure or such a wedding.
No, I agree.
See what I'm saying? So
there's a fine line that's crossed.
But getting back to that binary thing, then people go, well, so you're for government, allowing it or outlawing it. Well, no, I'm kind of somewhere in between once again.
Right.
I mean,
no, I agree what you're saying though,
Mhm.
because I personally believe there should be between a man and a woman, not two women or two men. I think it's wrong. I'm totally against that. But if that's what you want to do, that's your problem. But I agree it shouldn't have to be a government thing. You know what I'm saying? I think each state has to decide.
Yeah, government shouldn't be involved in marriage in the
Not-
first place.
Right. And I don't think the church should be punished for it if they don't agree with these people.
Exactly.
They want. I think it's wrong. I feel like they crossed the line now.
Well, and see,
You're taking away the freedom for the church now. No, you putting them fearful now because they can get sued if they don't.
right,
That's not right.
and the response is that the church then would be discriminating, and
Right.
and that should be against the law. You can't
Right.
discriminate, so you got to force the church to do it.
Yeah.
And that's a total misunderstanding of what our rights are about,
Right.
or as Half Right said, bake the cake. Bake the damn cake. So I'm a firm believer in something that's in the Declaration of Independence: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So, in other words, your right is not something that government must guarantee. Your right is something you should be able to pursue. So if you have a right to marry whoever you want, then you have a right to pursue it. That doesn't mean that everybody has to bend down and do it.
I agree.
And so, or to bake the cake, just because someone won't bake your cake doesn't mean they're being discriminatory. It means they don't offer that product.
Right.
If you want your cake baked, find someone who'll bake it. If you want to marry the dude, find someone who's willing to do it. If nobody's willing to do it, that's up to the culture. If someone's willing to do it, then fine, that's up to the culture. And for government to force someone to bake the cake or to do the marriage or to not do the marriage, not bake the cake,
right.
And maybe that's a little bit of a libertarian kind of streak in me, but and like I said, as a Christian, I'm a firm believer in man and woman. Marriage is something that God created. I understand from a Christian point of view that this is the enemy trying to destroy what God has created. I get all that. But as a constitutionalist, my first response is it's not up to government to dictate that.
They should.
So if you want to do those things, you will pay consequences for it. That's your decision. Me saying that I think it's a bad idea and I think it's a sin isn't something that I should then be jailed for. That's because freedom of speech is freedom of speech.
Right.
But I don't believe that there should be a law saying you can't.
Yeah, I agree.
But I definitely think that you shouldn't. And it's not good for society. It's not good for the culture. And that's the way I kind of look at it. So, and what fascinates me about that issue, not that I wanted to get into that issue, but I'll get into it for a moment, is I grew up around that a little bit because my father was kind of swung the bat both ways and sometimes preferred to, swing the bat with the same team. So to speak, I'll say it that way. And so I grew up kind of around that a little bit. When my parents divorced when I was a baby, and I only saw my dad like once or twice a year. But when I did see him, I was around it. He disappeared when I was 12 because he realized that as I was getting older, that his lifestyle may negatively affect my development, and so he stepped aside. The big thing for him to do, because he saw that I was in a loving family with my stepdad, who's been my dad since I was 3. But my point is, back then, they weren't calling for marriage. You're funny, half right. I had no idea your dad played baseball. You know what I mean. So back then they weren't
Sorry.
they weren't demanding marriage. They were mocking marriage.
Yeah.
They weren't saying they were born that way. They were proud of the fact that they'd made that decision so they could poke God in the eye. And so and I understand more about that lifestyle than most people do. And so my attitude is it has its consequences. It's not good. It goes against God's law, rule of laws, whole bit. But as a constitutionalist, there shouldn't be a law saying, you'll be imprisoned if you decide to marry that dude. But that doesn't mean the opposite is true, and the government must force everybody to celebrate it or force a church to hold those types of ceremonies. As a constitutionalist, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, so on and so forth. So, and I wanted to make sure that got out there. But all right, now to get the war hamster, the first group that pushed for gay rights was the Fabians socialists. They also had the goal of decaying society. Do the math. Yeah, absolutely. And you get into Cleon Skousen's list of 45 if you want to, also from The Naked Communist. And one of those things on that list to destroy America and bring about a communist system is to normalize homosexuality. But anyway, so get back to my point. So on social issues, libertarians tend to support same-sex marriage, other social freedoms. That doesn't necessarily reflect their approval of those choices, but rather the belief that government shouldn't regulate personal relationships. Once again, as a constitutionalist, if a state wants to have those laws, technically they can. I'm not necessarily sure that those laws should be in place, but at the same time, I don't think the opposite effect of laws should be in place either. One who believes that they are one. A libertarian tends to believe that the presence of a national government with centralized power is a bad thing. Someone who believes in the presence of a national government with centralized powers might say, well, those laws regarding those issues belong to the federal government. Constitutionalists like me argues it belongs to states, and generally, a lot of these social issues, there shouldn't even be laws, but it depends on what it is. Depends on if someone's rights are being betrayed. In the homosexual community, as long as it doesn't directly negatively influence other people, let them do what they do. But see, abortion, that's something that states, I think, should make laws, because I believe that another life is being ended. Their right to life is being disallowed to them based on somebody else's decision. So that's the constitutional way that I look at it. Now, the tension between libertarians, conservatives, those approaches, now this reflects a broader question about America's future. Should we prioritize individual autonomy above all else? Should we preserve institutions and traditions that have sustained our civilization? And if there are people who hold that what might be considered extreme views on these issues, should the GOP consider jettisoning those individuals from the political party? Should the Thomas Masseys and the Rand Pauls, if they don't fit the purity, be thrown out? No, I don't play that purity game. We're not the left where we're going to cancel people. I don't think that that's something that we should be doing. I'm a fan of one of Ronald Reagan's famous quotes. The person who agrees with you 80% of the time is a friend and an ally, not a 20% traitor. Now, if this person's disagreements on certain issues is disruptive, if it is something that is causing problems, then the people will notice this. They will, because here's the thing. And have you ever heard this? Politics is the game of the possible. What can you possibly get? Sometimes you have to lose a couple steps to gain a couple steps.
Yes.
Or a few steps, right? And sometimes political progress requires working with people who share some of your views, most of your views, even if there are some areas of disagreement. And so when it comes to conservatives, constitutionalists, libertarians, we operate with each other in our midst. And I understand that. Reagan was kind of known for trying to unite different factions within the conservative movement. And so his quote kind of illustrated that philosophy, that political alliances should be based on common ground rather than demanding ideological purity. And this approach, I think, was particularly evident in his ability to bring together traditional conservatives, libertarians, and even former Democrats in what became known as the Reagan coalition. Now, there are some people you just can't work with.
Yeah, that's true.
But his quote, his idea of, if I agree with you most of the time, I'm going to be an ally at least on those things, is cited in discussions about political strategy, coalition building, particularly in conservative circles where there's ongoing debate about how broadly the movement should define itself. But when it comes to libertarian-minded Republicans like Rand Paul and Thomas Massie and how to work with them, once again, the answer may lie somewhere between the extremes. I mean, we can respect individual liberty while recognizing that certain moral standards or social structures benefit society. We can limit government power while acknowledging that some regulations protect rather than threaten freedom, and then take into consideration who should be legislating regarding those issues: the federal government, the states, or local jurisdictions. So, and it's worth noting that, Rand Paul, Thomas Massie, people like them, that they don't consistently adhere to libertarian positions. They incorporate libertarian elements into a broader conservative framework. Their libertarian-leaning positions on civil liberties and government spending coexist more with more conservative views on other issues. And I understand the libertarian appeal while recognizing its limitations, and that helps us navigate today's political landscape. And it's important for us to listen to all ideas. I get that. And we're not going to agree all the time. That's just human nature. That's just the truth. As well as we have, as awesome as a relationship my wife and I have, trust me, there's a few things we just don't agree on. But, we don't let that get in the way. I'm not going to be here. Well, nope. You disagree with me on that one thing. Forget it. That's it. No, obviously we can't be that way. And so we can appreciate the libertarians' important contributions to discussions about government overreach without adopting maybe some of their more extreme positions. And let's also remember that constitutional governance requires balancing competing values: liberty, order, individual rights, communal responsibilities, local autonomy, national security. It's all a balancing act, not ideological purity, that should guide our political judgments. Context, understanding, balance, the moderations, avoiding extremes when it's necessary, and so on and so forth. And also, let's understand this. While I may have, and I really liked Thomas Massie early on, I really liked Rand Paul early on some of the things now, I think that they have kind of gone too far, deviating too far from where they need to be. But in the end, if they have views that are outside the grand scheme, if they're outside what is acceptable to the culture or deviates from where they need to be from the party's point of view or from the voters' point of view, their seat in government may be shorter lived than they might expect. There may even be more issues and complexities beneath the surface than most Americans can see. The person who emailed me about this in the first place says, hey, there's a lot more going on regarding Massie and Rand Paul than Americans know. That's local to Kentucky politics. The local voters are well aware of these things that we might not be. And this is why the Republican form of government contains components that ensures local voices have a voice over, over a nationalized democracy, I guess you could call it. And that's an important part of what a republic is all about. And a case in point, Thomas Massie's loss in Kentucky. He lost in this year's Republican primary. The voters decided he was going too far off where he needed to be. Right, wrong, or in between, whether you agree or disagree, that's what happened. And more often than not, when left to the culture will decide in the right direction when there's no manipulation and all that. I do trust the culture more often than not. Now, I get it. We have, evil schemes that are trying to influence our culture. I get all that.
Yeah.
But when left to a moral people, a virtuous society, they're going to do the right thing. They're going to, say, okay, this person is not what we need. They need to be replaced. Or at least that tends to be the reality, I think, for today's GOP, not so much for the lefty leaning organizations, parties, and groups. But anyway, so that's my thoughts about libertarianism. I want people to understand that, and get back to what I was saying earlier, it's all about balance. I use the word balance so much. It's about balance. I'm not a fan of the extremes. I'm not a fan of it's either this or it's that. The absolutes more often than not. Like I said, some things are absolute. But I am not a fan of that typically, getting back to what I said earlier. More often than not, there's three sides to every story. What he said, what she said, and what really happened, or what is really the truth.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that's always the case either. But, and we just have to have the discernment. Anything you want to add to this? I asked you a few questions along the way, but for the most part, I dominated this. Are there thoughts?
That's okay. No, I'm good with you on that. I'm good with the fact that certain things that the government should stay out of. I'm good with the fact that sometimes we have to make decisions regarding our country and people are not going to be happy about it. And the fact is, President Trump is trying to protect us from us going to war. So sometimes we have to make the first move. And
Sometimes it's necessary. And,
Right.
and I agree. I
Yeah.
can't stand war. But
Nobody
sometimes it's
likes
necessary.
war because
Right.
a lot of innocent people are being killed
Sure.
without them knowing.
Well, and Trump has done well enough that innocent people are not being killed by American forces per se. They're hitting military targets.
Right. Yeah.
But the thing is, when it comes to war, the reality is sometimes that does happen.
Right. And it's sad because you're destroying people's homes and where they work and all this, all because whatever policies that country has for those people. And it's sad because people always get caught up on this, innocent people. And that's something you have to weigh. You have to weigh, do we go to war? People's going to die, yada, yada, yada. Do we not go to war and risk us getting hit and that's destroying America? So it's tough. It's not easy. It's a hard decision you have to make. And you have to make it with a well thought out plan of how you're going to go about it.
So Sons of Liberty in the chat room says a couple interesting things. First, he goes, America is on the precipice. Those retards are playing virtue signal. And often that's what it is. They virtue signal. And that goes back to the very beginning of the conversation. It's about emotions and feelings. That's what the virtue signal is all about. And then Sons of Liberty goes on to say 250 years of degradation. We don't have time for libertarian virtue signaling, rule of law, error on the side of liberty, punishment fit the crimes. I'm pretty much with you on that. And then he says, cannot meet a demon halfway. That is how we got here, 2016, 2026. Cluster, yeah, I'm not going to finish that sentence, but yeah. And so, and I agree. We have to, you have to know when to be firm and when not to be. You have to be able to discern that. And one of the things I do like about Trump is, and matter of fact, the book I'm working on right now, it's written, I'm just proofreading now. Hopefully it'll be out real soon. One of the chapters, or many of the chapters, what I talk about is when it comes to Trump, see, once again, we have this either or idea, this absolute. Either the president is weak and totally limited, or he's strong and then he is outside the Constitution.
Right.
It is possible to stay within constitutional authority, but yet be firm and strong and almost seem like he's national minded on the surface. It's possible to have what's the right word? Hamilton used it, and I hate quoting Hamilton. Normally I dislike him, but he's right here. To have an energetic president without him going beyond the boundaries of the Constitution. And so Trump has found a way to, for the most part, stay within constitutional authority, but yet really push it to its edge in the energetic firmness of being president, being a strong voice. You need someone who is strong dealing with the rest of the world. You know, I tell people all the time that when it came to the Constitution, under the Articles of Confederation, what we had was a system that was too weak. It was a lamb. What we needed was a lion, but the problem with the lions is the lions eat people. So how do you create a lion that's strong enough, federal government and a presidency that's strong enough to handle what the world needs? Because remember, when they were doing this, they lived in a world of empires. The old world was a bunch of empires that wanted to gobble up the United States. So you had to be strong enough to handle that, president that's strong enough to stand up to that stuff, but yet limited enough that it doesn't become a tyranny and devour the people. And so I believe that Trump, in many ways, is the president that they envisioned. A lion. When he's unleashed, man, he's a lion. But he stays within the cage and the shackles when it comes to domestic and certain issues. And Sons of Liberty strong enough and not too strong to be reined in if out of control. Thank you. That's a good way of putting it. And so, and I kind of see Trump as being that. And so in this book, I mean, there's like, I don't know, 25, 26 attacks of him being unconstitutional I go through in the book. And I explain every single one of them, why Trump was constitutional on all of them, or remained within the constitutional bounds. There's one of them where actually technically the law is unconstitutional, but because his job is to carry out the law, he still stayed within the Constitution, and the laws need to be changed. But it kind of reminds me of you know, the tax thing with Hillary, and you know, and he says, well, he said she says, well, you're not paying taxes. He says, well, of course I'm not, because the system's rigged. It's rigged, and I know it's rigged because I use it. And the reason it's rigged is because you want it rigged for your friends. But then you're mad that I'm using it the way you want your friends to use it.
Yeah.
If you don't want me to not have to pay as much taxes because I got all these breaks, then change the system. But you won't, because you want your friends to still have that rigged system. And that's kind of the way he has been on some of these things, like emergency powers, for example. There is no asterisk in the Constitution. Emergency powers are a very dangerous thing. When there's an emergency, there's nothing the Constitution says that the Constitution can be suspended. But we have a lot of laws in place that says, in case of emergency, the president can do certain things. He's taking advantage of them using emergency powers. Technically, he's within the Constitution because his job is to execute the laws of the country. And if the law says he can do something based on emergency powers, he can. Even though technically that law is unconstitutional because emergency powers in that manner are not supposed to exist. I think that's the only one in the book where he's technically not constitutional, but technically is. But the rest of them, he's totally, you know, right on target with what he's doing. But oh, Dearman, take the lion's teeth out and give him harmless, barely effective dentures. Well, I don't know about that, but what you do is you put him in a cage, as Jefferson said, the cage is the Constitution. You want a lion, but you put him in a cage. And you open that cage door when he needs to be a lion, when it comes to tariffs or war or whatever it may be, and you put him back in the cage when he's dealing with domestic issues. So he's not eating our liberty, so to speak. So Sons of Liberty, unconstitutional laws are null. Yes and no. So you're right that if a law is unconstitutional, it's really not a law. But while it's a law, it is technically a law. Who's to determine that? The courts are not supposed to determine that. If it's a law and it's unconstitutional, then it needs to be gotten rid of as a law. As long as it's a law, it's the law still. So yes, I agree with you that unconstitutional laws are repugnant to the Constitution and should be void. However, the way our system works, the way the Constitution lays it out, is it is not up to the courts or the president or anybody else to say, oh, well, that's not a law because it's unconstitutional. What if they start then deciding that laws that are constitutional are not constitutional? That's the reason why the founding fathers set it up so that as long as a law is law, it's still law, even if it's unconstitutional, and it needs to be then gotten rid of by the legislature if it's a bad law. And Abraham Lincoln, not someone necessarily like notification is at the state level, Sons of Liberty, and once again, that's a whole different discussion. But and then you run into when it comes to notification, then you run into a few other issues. I'm not arguing. I'm just saying that the way the system is the states can nullify. They can say you can't impose that against our states. They can do that. There is a formal process for that, by the way. But as long as a law is law, technically it is a law, and the president can execute that law. If it's bad law, then you need to get rid of the law. How do you get rid of the law? You put in the right people into the legislature. Our problem is we don't put the right people in the legislature. And it's not the courts don't have the authority to dictate to the country that that law is good, bad, or in between. They can have the judicial opinion, but it's still up to Congress to repeal that law because according to Article 1, Section 1 of the Constitution, all legislative powers herein granted are vested in Congress. So that means that the president and the courts don't have any legislative power, and to refuse to execute a law, to repeal a law, is a legislative power. So they can't do that. Only the legislature can. So and it is a dance. So and once again, it is up to us and the states, if we got rid of the 17th Amendment, to make sure the right legislators are in there so that there aren't unconstitutional laws and that they repeal the bad ones. I've always told people if I were to run for Congress that my pledge would be that every bill I proposed would be to get rid of a law. I would not create new law. I would not propose or sponsor bills to create new law. My entire job would be to get rid of law, unconstitutional law. 85%. Do injunctions only apply to the issuing state, Mr. Gibbs? Injunctions, technically, injunctions are a modern creation, and the courts cannot create an injunction against the president regarding executing a law. If a law is in place, the president can execute it, regardless of what the courts think of that law. That said, the court can issue an opinion to the Congress to say you need to get rid of that law, and then once it's gotten rid of, then the president can't execute it anymore. We need to go back to the states picking the senators, founder files, absolutely. So anyway, all right. The thing about the libertarianism, I figured it would take about half an hour to talk about. We're an hour and a half into the show.
Oh wow,
so
it's very cool, Dave.
So yeah, very cool. It was a good topic to talk about. We have to understand that. Let's see here. When we talk about extremes, see, what was another extreme I wanted to talk about? Okay, here we go.
It's hard to find a balance on certain things, especially if people are used to going to extremes and the reasons behind them. It's their reasons, but I'm not going to say you can't go extreme on this and go extreme on that. Who am I?
Yeah, in the end, it's their decision.
Right, and every decision has a consequence, whether it be good or bad.
Well, and laws should be in place when those consequences to make bad decisions affect the order of society. For example,
right.
Okay. There are not laws against being a bad driver, but there are laws against bad driving.
Yes.
If you're not as good as other people, they're not going to take away your license unless you violate the law with your bad driving enough.
Right.
So,
question for you, but what's enough?
Well, that comes down to our laws that are in place. So, you get so many tickets, and it depends on the state.
That's true.
I mean, in California, they've got a point system, and
Right.
each ticket or
Right.
each accident or whatever you get are worth points. And
Right.
if you reach a certain amount of points,
that's it.
and what is it, like every 3 years or 7 years, it drops off depending on what it
Right.
is,
Right.
and then you lose your license. Now in Oregon, they don't have a point system.
Yeah, totally different.
So if it gets to the point where it's just bad thing after bad thing after bad thing, and it gets excessive, then they'll decide, and they have a board that then will decide whether or not you should be able to keep your license, but they're a lot more relaxed on it. But my point was, for example, you have a right to go through an intersection.
Yes.
But so does everybody else. So, well, then there shouldn't be a law to keep me from going through the intersection. No, but there needs to be a law to make sure it's done in an orderly manner. So we put stop signs and stop lights, and everybody knows the rules, so that we can exercise our right to go through the intersection, but in an orderly manner. That is what law is supposed to do. Law is supposed to provide necessary rules for society to function in an orderly manner. The problem is you get a bunch of people in legislative positions and they start calling themselves lawmakers rather than representatives. I hate the term lawmakers. Their job is not to make law. Their job is to represent
the people.
But because they think they're lawmakers, their job is to just make laws. What happens when they run out of necessary laws good for the orderly functioning of society? They began to make bad laws.
Yeah, they'll come up with something.
They'll come up with something. Oh, I got to come up with something for a law. Hey, I got an idea. And it's something stupid, but they pat themselves on the back because they created a law. And that's the problem. I have no problem with government making law because law is necessary for an orderly society. Even when it comes to our rights. I have a right to go through the intersection, stoplight.
Right.
I'm not taking away my right to go through the intersection, it's making it orderly.
Right.
Well, the federal government has no business to make any law whatsoever regarding guns. States can. And like a law that says that, a little kid can't go in there and walk out with a gun, buy a gun and walk out with it. That's good law. I'm okay with that. And that's going to depend on each state. Every state's going to be different. So one state might decide that you need to be 18 to purchase a firearm, and somewhere in Montana or Wyoming it might be 14, or whatever. Or maybe you gotta get parents' permission. My friend Bob in down in the Temecula area, he was telling me about when he was a kid back in the 60s that he mail ordered a gun. And they got delivered to the post office, but the post office on the packaging that showed that it was a gun. So while he was able to purchase it himself, order it himself, he couldn't pick it up at the post office without a parent present because he was under 18.
Yeah, and that's
So and that was the law of, and I would expect it to be a state. That's a necessary law, and I'm okay with that. But then what happens, once again, you run out of necessary laws, and they start passing unnecessary laws, and then they get to the point where they then get so restrictive, it's tyrannical. Because they've run out of good laws to pass, and they want to start passing bad laws because we're lawmakers. We're just going to make law. Hey, I've got an idea. Let's put yellow reflective things around stoplights so people can see the stoplight. That's one of the stupidest things I've ever seen. But it's because someone's trying to find a law to make.
Well, the reason behind it is because when the fog.
No, that's the reason they give you.
Oh, okay.
Okay, because first of all, when the fog comes in, it's stupid. You know why? Because you say, well, you can't see the light. Well, you're not going to see the reflection either, because your light is going to reflect off the fog, right?
I'm just saying that
it's stupid. Well, it's one of the stupidest laws I've ever seen. That stupid reflective thing around stoplights.
It's like, okay, here's another one, stupid one. Another one where the sidewalk has been cut and have it for the blind people.
Oh, you mean the little bumps and stuff?
Little bumps.
Yeah.
How often do you see a blind person by themselves?
Now,
seriously, I've never seen one in my whole life.
It does happen, but
really,
do you spend that much money for a relatively small part of the population, which in most cases are going to have someone with them when they go out there anyway?
Right. It's already given to you that a blind person is not going to go out by themselves.
Dearman asks, how can one judge override another judge's injunction if from a legal standpoint, not from a constitutional standpoint? The higher the court, the higher the authority. So
Yeah.
if let's say a district judge had an injunction, then a circuit judge could override that because they're higher ranking in the system.
Right.
Again, from a constitutional standpoint, injunctions injunctions against the execution of law by a governor or by a president, those are unconstitutional technically. Um, so, but anyway, get back to something I wanted to talk about. So,
What's that?
so one of the things that I've noticed is as time has passed, remember I said earlier in the program that the Democratic Party has always been pursuing more democracy. And then in the last, say, about 130 years,
Oh, wow. Okay.
have really fallen victim to the collectivistic, leftism, socialism, commie kind of deal. But they also knew early on that the American people would never accept those types of collectivistic viewpoints. So they would, and this goes back to what Warhamster was saying in the chat room about the Fabians. The Fabians believed in a slow, boil the frog slowly kind of deal. So they always were very careful on how much collectivism they injected. But like with anything, the way I like to explain it, everything progresses. So progressive is actually a proper term for them. Not progress in the sense of progress, but progressive in the sense that it progresses forward, gets worse. The envelope is always being pushed. Right? So if it's like the old saying, you give an inch, they take a mile. They're always trying to get that next inch and the next inch and the next inch. And that's just what happens. And so what has happened over time as our political landscape continues to unfold is the Democratic Party is becoming more and more willing to do certain things. Push for a collectivistic system, democratic socialism, whatever you want to call it. And also, they are increasing their willingness to manipulate foundational American institutions because when they are unable to win in the arena of ideas. And they can't win in the arena of ideas. Americans don't accept it. And it's like the old saying that Satan doesn't appear as a demon. He appears as an angel of light, because you would never, if he came up and said, I'm here to make your life horrible, you're never going to accept it. They can't come out and say, well, we want communism. That you would never accept it. So they have to kind of play the game of a little bit here, a little bit there, manipulate the system and so on and so forth, because they can't win in the arena of ideas. And so this systematic approach to power preservation, this demonstrates something way beyond just them having political opposition to what we believe. You okay? Oh, so instead of a frog in the pot, we got a frog in your throat? Is that what's going on? See, even little Petey's worried about you. Little Doug come running over to her. She started coughing. He's worried about her.
Go ahead. Sorry.
Geez Louise. Dog was quicker to respond than I was.
I know. You just kept talking. Wow.
So anyway, so what we have is this fundamental challenge to the constitutional order by the left, and they're even willing to attack the institutions, attack the Constitution, but then they will frame it as something different, and they will project. And now, whenever an electoral defeat looms, especially right now, where they're sitting there, they'll tell you in the mainstream media, that Trump is very unpopular and they're gonna no problem win the midterms. They're up against the ropes, and in the past they've been up against the ropes. And what they'll do is they'll turn to restructuring the very systems of American governance rather than adjusting their policy positions. You saw the what was that called? The post-mortem report.
Oh.
And they weren't willing to admit the reason why they lost the last election? Well, it's because we weren't loud enough about our policies. No, it's because of your policies you lost. It was about your policy positions. And then you've got this kind of violent kind of streak. House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, said at this progressive conference, we're going to have to explore judicial reform state by state and at the federal level. Everything should be on the table as far as I'm concerned. Everything? I mean, this isn't theoretical either. I mean, in Virginia, Democrats reportedly considered lowering the mandatory retirement age for state Supreme Court justices from 75 to 54. Which would have forced out every sitting justice so they could replace them with their sympathetic Democratic lawyers. The purpose to overturn a court decision that blocked a gerrymandering scheme designed to add 4 Democratic seats to Congress. And I mean, it was a nasty one, the way they gerrymandered. They said, well, the Republicans are gerrymandering. No, they are ungerrymandering. They are taking the Democratic gerrymandering and putting it back into a reasonable way of setting up the system, of setting up the districts. There's, see how those Democrats, those Republicans are gerrymandering. No, they're not. And it's gerrymandering, by the way. Don't say gerrymandering. It's gerrymandering. It's named after Elbridge Gerry. But anyway, Kamala Harris even went so far as to say that Democrats should not only expand the Supreme Court, but abolish the Electoral College to regain power. It's all about power with these people. They are willing to bomb the system to get their way. Institutional arson is what House Speaker Mike Johnson called it. Blow up the system when you lose, right? And what's even more chilling is the violent extremist kind of language. And then they say, oh, well, we didn't call for that violence. Yeah, your rhetoric is. And Jeffries was at the Center for American Progress Ideas Conference, and he didn't mince words. Either MAGA extremists are going to break the country or we're going to break them, and our goal is to break them. Really? That's your language? Then he elaborated. He said, well, we will defeat them. We have to beat them electorally. And then we have to break their spirit because of the extremism that's being unleashed on the American people.
Wow.
Break our spirit? I want to defeat you guys, but I don't want to beat you in the ground, break your spirit, and beat you with a stick.
6 inch.
Inside joke. What we're seeing isn't just political rhetoric. They have declared war against America and American citizens. They have decided they want to break the spirit of 77 million Americans. That's how many people voted for Trump, right? This is how the Democrats talk to people they don't agree with, violently, and then they're surprised when we see some of the stuff that we've seen. And this institutional assault is being enabled by their media allies who demonstrate remarkable comfort with falsehoods, lying, calling for the violence. And then when the facts don't support the narrative, falsehoods will suffice. They will lie, but then they'll say the other side's lying. They project it. You saw the Jill Biden thing after Joe Biden.
Yeah.
I thought he might have been having a stroke or something. You liar.
She knew.
They knew all. He never acted like that before. We had already seen it.
Yeah, they know.
And then she gets up, and then afterwards, if she was so concerned and thought he was having a stroke or something, then why afterwards is she up there? You answered all the questions, Joe, but Trump, what did he do? He lied. And she's lying as she's saying that.
It's sad.
And then you've got, the CIA, spying on Tulsi Gabbard's team as they're trying to investigate the deep state. You've got, this swamp deep state, whatever, that's trying to attack us from within. Why such a desperate approach? Not only because they're desperate to hang on to their power, it's a fight or flight kind of thing, but also because they have been up to no good, and it's being unveiled. Donald Trump has one of the best things that could have happened to this country is that Donald Trump lost in 2020. They stole it, but that's one of the best things that could have happened. Because for 4 years, he learned who his allies were and what they were really up to. That first 4 years, man, he was surrounded by the enemy. He's trying to do this. They're throwing everything at him, COVID and January, 6, and after his first term, and they're doing everything. Well, right before the end of his first term, but everything they can. They're doing everything they can to make sure he never makes it to office again. Cheat, whatever. And somehow the guy who stuck a stick in their spokes the first time and knocked Hillary out, the heir apparent, got in again in 2020. They are desperate. Not only because he stuck a stick in their spokes for their power, but because they've been up to no good. All this fraud in Minnesota, they're aware of it. Their policies are enabling it. And the thing is, they profit off of it, but then they tell you, if you look into it, you're racist. And then they use the 1619 stupid stuff. Because, see, here's the thing. Remember, deep down, they're all communists. They're communists. They may not even think they're communists. They're communists. And they're following for the communist game. And the thing is, in order to have their collectivistic communist revolution, even if it's not a violent revolution, there must be class warfare. And you're not going to have class warfare if everything's good. If there's a thriving middle class, you can't have class warfare. If everybody believes in American liberty and the Constitution and whatever else you want to throw in there, then how are you going to have your revolution? So they have to make America look broken. Doesn't matter what your eyes and ears see and hear. Doesn't matter if it doesn't look broken. They have to convince you that it's broken. And so they pull all this stuff out of there. And then what does Trump do? He proves it isn't broken. That his style of governance and conservatism, constitution, whatever, violent crime rates have seen the largest decrease since 1937. Murder rates are at their lowest since records began in 1900. With these fraud crackdowns, we're going to reduce federal spending so much that Stephen Miller is saying, hey, we might even be able to balance the budget. Well, they can't have that. They got to prove to you everything's broken. And the gravy train is ending, and they're panicking. Their power, it's leaving the fingertips. The light at the end of the tunnel for making it a one-party system is vanishing. They are lashing out. They're doing whatever they can to stop Trump. They're doing whatever they can to stop you. They want to abolish the filibuster, abolish ICE, open the borders wide open. They want to kill our virtuous society with the transgender ideology and, tell you that biological sex is fluid, white men are the greatest domestic terrorist threat, expand the Supreme Court, get rid of electoral college, everything they are wanting to blow it up to get what they want. And what's funny about it is the harder they try to convince you it's broken, the more people are going, these people are nuts. And recent polls are showing broad support for Trump's agenda ahead of the midterms. Trump-backed candidates in the primaries, so far, they're undefeated. So far. I think the American people, many American people who used to vote Democrat or still vote Democrat are going, whoa, what the heck is going on here? Spencer Pratt's a great example in LA. I mean, that's dominated by Democrats, but yet he's almost neck and neck. It's not because Republicans are coming out to vote or are going to come out to vote supporting him. That's Democrats are saying, okay, we're sick of this junk. Spencer, we'll give you a stab at it. Because anything's better than this commie, Karen Bass, or the Democratic socialist, Rahman, who wants to be, who's running for this. And so Spencer Pratt's in the running. I hope he wins. And he reminds me a lot of Trump. He's an outsider, and that's what's freaking them out the most. Because see, if it's just a typical Republican, they can control them. Because they can do things to attack their political aspirations. They've got a file on everybody, blackmail file on everybody. Just ask Eric Swalwell. And and they're freaking out. They don't know what to do with people like Spencer Pratt or Trump because they're outside the system. They can't control them. They can't threaten them. Spencer Pratt doesn't want to be mayor. He's running because he feels he's got it because he's the only one that seems to be talking about the truth. Funny story about Spencer Pratt. I think I mentioned this last week or the week before. I'm actually related to him. He's my uncle's grandson. My uncle passed away. Well, when did Stan pass away?
Wow, it's been a while.
About 6 years, 7 years, 8 years ago?
A while ago, yeah.
Anyway, my Uncle Stan, Spencer was his grandson. I can't remember if it's like by blood or if it's Shirley. I think it's like a step grandson through Shirley. But anyway, yeah, no, Spencer's like family. He don't know I'm family, but I know he is. Both of our names are on, Stan's, funeral paperwork website, whatever. But yeah, my dad and Spencer's grandfather, brothers. But anyway, I like him. I don't agree with him on absolutely everything, but I love the fact that he's stirring up Los Angeles. People say, well, yeah, but it doesn't influence us. It's just Los Angeles. No, it does. Where are a lot of these loony lefty Democrats coming from? California and New York.
Yeah.
So what do? How do you stop a problem? Well, if you've got weeds growing up, how do you stop the weeds? You gotta go to the root of the problem, right? You pull out a weed, another weed appears. You got to figure out a way to stop them from taking root in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
And where are they taking root? In places like California and New York and Chicago. And don't believe the polls in California. Oh, yeah, no, here's the thing, Cold Steel. I'm a firm believer that all polls lean anywhere from 5% to 15% to the left. So if you want to know what a poll really is, go away from the Democrat at about 15 points. 10, 15, maybe 5 in some cases. And that'll be the accurate number. So they're saying he's right now, what, about 8 points or something like that? So he's actually leading.
That we know of, depends.
I think.
Yeah.
And the reason why is because he's not. The reason why he's leading is because he's not playing ideology. Nope. He's not playing Republican Democrat. He's just, this is the truth. Mm-hmm. This is what I see.
Right.
As a candidate, I'm walking the streets and this is what I see. And I, like you, am receiving the bad end of the deal from the current leadership. My house burned down because these people couldn't manage anything properly.
Yeah, that's true.
That's all he's doing. Say, hey, open your eyes. Here's the problem. Karen Bass said she'd have the homeless out of L.A. by 2026. Well, here we are.
Yeah.
They encourage it. Oh, we'll get them new teeth. That way, they can have a chance to. Homeless people, I know there's always exceptions, but generally there are people who don't want to be responsible. They don't want to live in the system. That's the way they want it. A lot of it is mental health issues, and if that's the case, then we need to have a place for them. Mm-hmm. Mental health facilities. So we'll see what happens.
We will.
So, any final remarks? As we got about 5 minutes left.
No, I think I said what I need to say. I'm good with that. What you had to say. So
All right.
that was good. Good job, Dave.
Well, I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
It's funny because
a craving for ice cream cone.
you have a craving for ice cream cones. So you're saying the moment the show's over, we're heading down
I
to
want to get a waffle.
Slugs and Stones and Slugs and Stones. Is that what it's called?
Get a 2 scoop. Is that okay? It's sunny over here.
Slugs and Stones.
It's sunny.
It's sunny here, but that doesn't mean it is down in town. They get the marine layer. Of course, it might be sunny by now.
It's true.
Maybe partly cloudy down there.
That's okay.
So yeah, we live. So where we live on the Oregon coast is it's funny because town is usually like San Francisco. They've always got this marine layer. We only live like 4 miles up the road, 3 miles up main road, and then a mile up a dirt road, and we're up in the hills a little bit. And so when it's socked in town, we're usually sunny.
Yep.
On those days, and then when it's raining, it's raining.
It's true.
But we got a little rain earlier this week. But it is fascinating watching, living here, watching how it is. So it's like 63 down in town. What does it say is in the garage? Probably the upper 60s. Probably like 68, 69, probably. Yeah. What is it? 77. So okay, so 63 in town and 77 in our garage. So it's a little bit warmer the garage pump. So let's say 75 outside. But so you sure there's nothing else you want to say? She's gonna sit there and look beautiful.
That's right.
So thanks for spending the time. DouglasVGibbs.com. I do write every day. I've got a new book I'm really pushing to try to get
You're working really hard at it too.
Yeah, I've been working on it quite a bit. So it's a
good book.
Well, and you said that about the last one.
I know they're all
the last one. They're all good?
Yeah, but they were bad to you.
My biggest fan. But anyway, DouglasVGibbs.com if you want to visit my website. The books are not listed there yet. We're working on getting a new books page there, but you can find them at Amazon. Just look for books by Douglas V. Gibbs. And United we stand, combined we kick butt. God bless America, friends. God bless you. Thanks for spending the time with me. You guys in the chat room, you're a lot of fun. I really like your Repeal Democracy book, says Cold Steel. There's a guy, we call him Short Bus because he calls himself Real Special Ed on a Tuesday show I do. He has had the same kudos about that book. Thank you. Repeal Democracy, that Cold Steel mentions in the chat. What that book is it really it takes a Republican and democracy forms of government. It tells you the difference between a republic and a democracy. And I break it down chapter by chapter. And reason why we're a republic, not a democracy. A lot of people have told me they read my book, Repeal Democracy, and it just makes them even angrier when they hear some of those knuckleheads out there call our country a democracy. But anyway, so thank you for thank you, Cold Steel, for the plug there. But anyway, the new book is called the Constitutional Presidency of Donald J. Trump. Once again, I'm challenging all the accusations that he's unconstitutional. You dozed off, really, War Hamster? All right, good night, brother. Yeah, he said he dozed off. That's okay. We'll forgive him. So DouglasVGibbs.com. If you go to the video page of this show, if you're like, oh, I didn't catch the whole show and I don't want to go looking for it on Patriots Soapbox, I recorded the show. It will be available at the video page. The last one was. I'm just starting to do that. So once I get it on there, I'll take later on tonight. I'll probably post it. So if you go to my video page at DouglasVGibbs.com, check out all my shows. Go to my radio page. That's where I advertise upcoming shows. Go to the blog. I write there every day. It has been a pleasure being here. Magamo, it's good to see you. I'm glad you're here. And you've got a warmed up crowd just for you. I think we gave them a pretty good program tonight. I think they're ready to roll now for your show.
That's good. I'll whip them into shape if they're not.
Whip them into shape. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then my wife joked earlier. She said, "Yeah, but with a little stick." The joke is in Kentucky, there's a law where it's illegal to beat your wife with a stick on the front steps of the courthouse on a Sunday unless the stick is shorter than 6 inches.
Oh,
And
God,
so so
some of
we so
these
so,
rules.
so we talk about beatings, and Virginia says, as long as it's a short stick.
Some of the laws, I live in New England, and some of the laws still on the books are just unreal, but it's funny.
Yeah, some of them are. Like I said,
Yeah,
if I ever get elected office, my first and foremost will always be to get rid of laws, not create new ones. But anyway, have a great show, Magamo. It's great to see you, audience. You guys have been awesome as always, and we'll
enjoy
see
your
you
ice
guys.
cream.
Yeah, you gotta get her some ice cream. She's
That's
craving
right.
ice cream. All right,
That's the
we're out of
truth.
here.
All
Thanks.
right, see you later.
Okay, bye.
No, I want ice cream.